So as we continue our little journey through Theodicy, I I wanted to say a little bit more about his comment on 255, that is Josh Moritz. This is one key reason, he's talking about plate tectonics at the time, one key reason why life in the universe is rare as well. It may be rare, but in the size of our universe, with numberless galaxies, oh my goodness, and numberless galaxies with numberless stars therein, each one, and lots of possibilities for life-bearing planets. I think you could say that it's rare and still be talking about millions of planets that may have life, and indeed, even if you said millions of planets, and then even just said and thousands of planets that have the possibility of intelligent life. I mean, in the size of our universe, it could still be very rare and still have like considerable numbers of planets that sustain life. You know, very soon the sequel to Avatar will be coming out. You know, just I guess that's not proof, is it? But you know, I'm a science fiction buff. But beyond that, I don't think it has to do with science fiction in my case so much as two things. Again, the vastness of the universe, and even if we were to argue that it took this kind of time and vastness to make a world like ours, this one little planet in our dinky little solar system, in our backwater galaxy, you know, among numberless galaxies. It stretches my faith, actually, is what it stretches. If I were forced to believe that life only occurred here, and even only intelligent life here, that'd take a lot of faith, actually, to believe that. And because I do believe in God as creator, and that I have no reason at all to think that God's creativity would be so limited to just this planet in terms of life, and indeed intelligent life. It just strains credulity altogether to me to think in such small ways. I could be wrong about all that, of course, but since we don't know yet, I'm going to stay out there on that limb for a while, and you're invited to come out on that limb with me if you'd like. So Moritz talks a bit about earthquakes on 256. Draws on a very good philosopher of religion, Christian philosopher of religion by the name of Nancy Murphy, in that top paragraph on 256. In other words, was God's creation of plate tectonics the cause of unavoidable suffering and devastation in December of 2004? Murphy thinks not. Overpopulation and poverty were also key culprits. Murphy points out that tectonically active areas are often overpopulated because of the recycling of the crust in these locations makes fishing and coastal farming lucrative. So people tend to gather at these places that indeed are actually rather dangerous and threatening. So when natural disasters strike, it is the poor who suffer most. Now, that's not always the case. We're in a coastal region right here, and I think we all have heard of the San Andreas Fault. I certainly don't know for sure, but I've certainly also been told many times that someday, and we don't know when, we're going to get a really big earthquake. And it may, in fact, create a whole new coastal line here in Southern California. Maybe it's a good thing that in a few months, Janice and I are moving from Ocean Beach to North Park. Who knows? Eventually, that may be new coastal property. I know that's a grim thing to say, but here we have a great illustration, this beautiful Point Loma, and our campus on Sunset Cliffs, and it's not at all impossible or even unlikely that someday this is all going to slip down into the Pacific. I hope later than sooner. And I really hope after our lives are done, but somebody will be living here, and they will tend to be rich people. Um, but a lot of homeless poor also come to Southern California and to Ocean Beach, and where the temperature is mild. So all kinds of people suffer, but from such events. And someday there'll be, if human life is still occurring on planet Earth, our ancestors, our descendants might stand on a new version of Sunset Cliffs and marvel at the beauty while the ruins of Point Loma Nazarene University are underwater. Think on that for a little while. Gee, Lodal, happy Thanksgiving to you as well. Why would an all-loving God create through evolution is the next question. I think there's some good stuff here. Are animals conscious of suffering? The bottom line answer seems to be yes, even if there was a time when scientists and philosophers said no. To John Wesley's credit, way back at the end of the 18th century, I think probably because he spent a lot of time with horses. He certainly had his favorite horse, but a lot of horses. I mean, he knew, and people knew. Animals experience pain. So again, the point being, we cannot ignore that or pretend like the problem of evil extends only to human life. Does the evolutionary process necessitate animal suffering? That starts on page 259. The right answer seems to be yes. And that may seem harsh. But last night I sat down to Thanksgiving dinner. I know that my family and I had choices about what we could eat. But we did have turkey, as is traditional for many people, not all, and not for all of you. And I deeply respect those who have said, I'm not going to contribute to the suffering of animals, whether it's to their execution or to their inhumane treatment, in various kinds of farming situations where the animals are crowded and overstuffed, and the turkeys are injected with who knows what. I know you can get organic stuff, but still there's suffering and death involved. We had dressing, turkey stuffing or dressing that had sausage, and I've been to one of those slaughterhouses with the pigs, and it's like hell. So, and I think that's moral evil. I do, but I still ate the stuffing. So I made choices. We all do. And the thing about being human is we understand these elements of choice, these factors, and can make significant choices other than those that contribute further to animal suffering. So here I am making those admissions, and maybe this is why I know I need to continue to pray, forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And I can also continue to choose away, which I generally do, away from mammal consumption, hamburger, steaks, etc. And I move toward birds and fish. I do think birds and fish also are sentient creatures and certainly can suffer. So, I'm still having to deal with that. The point is, we could go on and on about how, if evolution is true, look at all the suffering of creatures, etc. True enough. And maybe, and I think that maybe Moritz will talk about this. I don't want to go too quickly to kind of a Christology of Christological theodicy, or that is, but I think this might be a good time to do it. If evolutionary theory is true, and I do think it is, then consumption of creatures by other creatures has been going on, ever since there were creatures. And that's an exchange of energy that we benefit from, of course, and that other creatures benefit from. Sometimes other creatures benefit from it at the expense of human beings. That certainly happened plenty of times in the history of the world. That's like when we get eaten. You probably understood what I was saying. We live in a world where at times creatures surrender their lives, and granted most of the time unwillingly, for the sake of other creatures. There is an element within creation itself of consumption, and we might say of sacrifice. The question is whether we can understand that as the expression of a God who is love. And I want to say yes. I do say yes. I'm also aware that that's a deep challenge. How does that work? Well, if indeed, here's a beginning of a Christian reply. God in Christ became flesh and lived among us. And even in the Gospel of John, Jesus says, my flesh is the bread of the world, or bread for the world. That in Jesus, God in some ways enters into and offers God's own life and being and strength for the nourishment of creaturely existence. We probably have to say more about this at some point. But what I'm getting at is that is there at the very heart of the world in which we live an element in which we lay down our lives, finally, for the sake of other lives? 1 John says, here's how we know what love is, that Christ laid down his life for us, and we ought to lay down our lives for one another. And in a sense, we could say that in the big picture, creation is a matter of creatures laying down their lives for one another. Again, now, I'm not saying that, the bunny rabbit is happy with that arrangement as it's being chased down by the coyote, but that there is in creation itself a kind of surrendering, giving, and receiving of life. I don't want to romanticize this. I mean, in Jesus' case, it's like a slow death on a Roman crucifix, basically, what do you call that? When you can't breathe anymore, well, asphyxiating, that's the big word. Very slowly and very painfully. There is that kind of tragic, deeply tragic element at the heart of the universe. Christianity goes very bold and says God shares in that. Wow. I'll stop there.